there, and welcome. Get ready for a deep dive into something pretty fascinating. Trust. And not just trust in general, but how we build it with all these, digital minds popping up everywhere.
Absolutely. It's everywhere you look these days.
Right. Like when Siri recommends a new restaurant or that self-driving car flawlessly navigates rush hour traffic. How do we learn to trust these systems? That's what we're going to unpack today. You sent in this intriguing research paper.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's called Almost Human. Anthropomorphism increases trust resilience in cognitive agents. It was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, applied back in 2016. And it gets at this question, are we really fooled into treating machines like people, or is there something else going on?
It's a great question because, let's face it, we encounter this stuff every single day.
Every single day. So, to help us break down this research, we're joined by, well, you, our expert. Welcome to the show, by the way.
It's great to be here. Always happy to dive into these topics. And this paper, in particular, it really highlights some crucial aspects of human-automation interaction.
Okay, so set the stage for us. What did these researchers actually do?
Sure. They set up this clever experiment, really. They wanted to see how people reacted to 3 different kinds of, I guess you could call them automated agents.
Yeah, 3 different agents?
And the task was pattern detection, so trying to figure out a pattern. But, and here's the kicker, the agent's advice became less and less reliable over time.
Ooh, sneaky, so they were messing with them.
A little bit. But that was the point. They wanted to see how trust was formed, how it broke down, and if it could be repaired.
I'm hooked already. All right, so tell me a bit more about these agents. Who were the contenders in this digital trust-building competition?
All right, so we'll start with our first contestant, the computer agent. Picture this. Nothing fancy, just your classic computer interface, blinking lights, beeping sounds, the whole shebang.
Very retro.
Exactly. No human-like avatars, nothing like that. Think back to, like, really old digital assistants or computers. That's the vibe.
Got it. Keeping it old school. So that's contender number 1. Who else was in the lineup?
Next, we've got the avatar agent, our second contender. This one's a bit more modern. We're talking about a virtual character, with a face and body, capable of speech, even expressing some basic emotions.
So like those early digital assistants, but with a little more personality.
Yeah. Or think of a character in, like, a really basic video game, nothing too fancy.
Okay, so we're moving up the evolutionary ladder of digital representation. What was agent number 3?
All right, bringing up the rear, we had the human agent. This one was a recording of an actual person, a male actor in this case, delivering the advice.
A real human voice. Interesting.
And they really tried to make it sound natural, with pauses and those little thinking cues we all use.
Okay, so we've got the classic computer, a simple avatar, and a real person. What happened when they were put to the test? Did people automatically gravitate toward the human-like agent?
Well, that's where things get interesting, in that trust formation stage. When the agents were still reliable.
Right, everyone's on their best behavior.
People were more likely to trust the computer.
Really? That's not what I expected at all. Why would the computer have the upper hand there?
Well, it might come down to something called automation bias. Essentially, we tend to overestimate machines a bit. We assume they're more objective, less prone to those human errors.
That makes sense. We walk in thinking, okay, computer, you've got this.
Right. So even though we're naturally drawn to things that resemble us, when it comes to trusting information, we actually might put more faith in the perceived perfection of machines, at least initially.
It's like we inherently trust a calculator more than we trust ourselves to do math in our heads, right? Fascinating how our brains work. But what happens when the machines inevitably mess up? Because let's face it, no one's perfect.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about this research. They dug into that too.
So we walk in with these high expectations for machines, almost like that trust is already there from the get-go. It makes you wonder if that trust can ever be repaired once it's broken.
Exactly right. And that's a key part of this study. They really wanted to see what happened when the agents started making mistakes.
Yeah, because in the real world, nothing's perfect, including AI. So, spill the tea. What happened when the agents started messing up?
Okay, so as you might expect, when the agent's advice got worse, people's trust started to go downhill across the board. But here's the interesting part. People were way faster to lose trust in the computer agent. Like one mistake and it was over.
Really? Like a deal breaker? Wow.
Pretty much. But when the human agent made those same mistakes, people were way more forgiving.
It's almost like we have more empathy for the human because we know they're capable of making mistakes. But with machines, we expect this, like cold, hard logic. And when they fail to deliver, it's almost a shock to the system.
Exactly. It's like those expectations really come into play. We hold machines to this, well, this superhuman standard, but then the researchers took it a step further. They wanted to see if that broken trust could be repaired.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do you even begin to mend a fractured digital heart? Did they, like, have to invent some super advanced algorithm to win back people's trust?
Get this. The solution was surprisingly simple. Ready for it? The agents apologized.
They apologize. That's it. Like, just a simple, oops, my bad. Really?
I know, right? Sounds almost too easy. But the results were clear. Those apologies, even though they were super basic, made a big difference. When the computer agent and the avatar agent fessed up to their mistakes, it really changed how people saw them.
Huh. So even if we might be a little wary of machines at first, a little bit of vulnerability goes a long way.
It's really striking, isn't it? It's like, even though we know these agents aren't human, we still crave that acknowledgement, that sense that our feelings matter.
Totally. And it makes you think about how we design AI, right? Maybe all those social cues we take for granted, like apologies, actually play a crucial role in building trust, even in the digital world.
It's huge. I mean, this research really highlights how those little human touches can have an outsized impact on our experiences with AI, especially when it comes to tasks where we know errors are bound to happen.
So it's not about making AI apologize for every little thing. It's more about, like, strategically incorporating those human-like qualities, especially in situations where we might be more likely to, well, cut a human some slack.
Right. It's all about managing expectations.
Yeah.
If we go in knowing that no system is perfect, especially when something's new or really complex, we're more likely to be understanding when those inevitable hiccups occur.
But then on the flip side, what about tasks where precision is super important, like where even a tiny error could be a big deal?
Exactly. And that's where we might want to rethink those human-like qualities.
So we've got these situations where maybe we want our AI to be a little more human, a little more relatable, especially when mistakes are bound to happen. But then there are those other situations where, honestly, we just need the cold, hard logic of a machine. It seems like finding that right balance is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, right? Because we also have to consider things like the uncanny valley effect.
Oh, right, right. That whole thing where if something looks almost human but not quite, it's kind of creepy.
Exactly. Like those CGI characters where the eyes are just a little too far apart or the movements aren't quite fluid enough. We instinctively recoil from that, don't we?
100%. I don't want my AI giving me the creeps. So we need to be mindful of that line between, like, humanizing AI enough to build trust, but not so much that it becomes unsettling.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. And it leads to even bigger questions, like questions about the very nature of trust as AI continues to evolve.
Okay, yeah, because we're not just talking about, like, trusting Siri to give us directions anymore. AI is becoming more complex, more capable, so where do we go from here? What happens as AI grows up, so to speak?
It really makes you think, right? As AI becomes more sophisticated, not just mimicking us, but actually learning and adapting, could we one day form genuine bonds of trust with these machines?
Whoa. Okay, now we're getting into some deep philosophical territory. It's almost like, are we talking about a future where our best friend is a bot? Or our therapist is just a really, really advanced algorithm?
It might sound crazy, but is it really that far-fetched? Think about it. We get attached to all sorts of things. Objects, fictional characters, even our pets. Is it that much of a leap to imagine a future where we form similar bonds with AI? Especially as they become more attuned to our emotions, more responsive to our needs.
I guess it makes you question our whole definition of trust, doesn't it? Like, do we need to expand that definition to encompass these new kinds of relationships we might develop with AI?
Exactly. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's about recognizing that trust can exist in many forms. The trust we share with another human is going to be different from the trust we might develop with a machine, but it can still be a valuable, fulfilling connection in its own right.
So it's not necessarily about replacing human connection. It's more like AI could open up new avenues for connection, new ways to experience trust and companionship in this increasingly digital world.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe exploring those new avenues will even teach us something new about ourselves.
It's like holding up a mirror, right? We learn about ourselves by interacting with something that reflects back at us, even if that something is a complex algorithm. This has been quite the deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground here. From the nitty-gritty of how our brains respond to different kinds of AI to the philosophical implications of what it means to trust a machine.
It's been a fascinating conversation. And I think the key takeaway here is that as AI becomes more integrated into our lives, it's crucial for us to stay curious, to stay engaged with these questions of trust and connection.
Couldn't agree more. So, to our listeners, we'll leave you with this. As we navigate this increasingly automated world, how will you choose to engage with AI? What role will you allow it to play in your life? And how can you ensure that your interactions with technology are rooted in a foundation of trust, understanding, and maybe even a healthy dose of curiosity? That's it for this deep dive into the world of AI and trust. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing.